What's up, everybody? I am Adrian Walker. I'm a research fellow from the Centre for Big Data Research and Health at the University of New South Wales, Sydney.
Yeah, boy!
I'm fucking psyched to be here! We're going to talk some science! That's right. Now, you look at me and you probably think, look, that's a pretty generic kind of white science dude. And you are correct. But I do have a pretty big nose, which I believe puts me in pretty good standing with some of the other famous white science dudes.
David Burns.
My brand of science is epidemiology. That makes me an epidemiologist. Yeah, we're interested in diseases and health of the population. Specifically for me, I'm interested in fertility. Now you might be thinking, Adrian, fertility, conception, you're a man. Traditionally, man's role in conception is limited, maybe medium, in my case, right? But I'm hoping if you're out there and you do have a uterus that you will still listen. I think you will find it still interesting. So I say I work in fertility. I work in fertility treatments. The most common one you've probably heard of is IVF. These are treatments that people can undergo if they're having trouble conceiving a child. And they're really quite amazing. So if you don't know IVF or you don't know how it works, I'll just tell you a little bit. First, the person undergoing the treatment, they get a shit ton of hormones, ovulate a lot of eggs. They then go into a doctor's office and have those eggs extracted with a thin needle in the ovaries. That then needs to be fertilized, so you get some sperm and you get a petri dish and you do that. Or in a special case you might do this. And you hope that a viable embryo ensues, and after 3 to 5 days that embryo is reimplanted into the uterus and hopefully you get a pregnancy. Now, that's not the only type of fertility treatment, actually it's the one most people think of, but there's also other types of treatments. So there's one where you just take those hormones at a lower dose and they help you ovulate, get pregnant naturally. There's also one called intrauterine insemination, which as it sounds is the manual implantation of sperm into the vagina by a doctor, or as my wife lovingly calls it, the turkey baster. There's a mental image. So I'm really privileged to work in fertility. These treatments are game changers. They help so many people. 50 years ago, if you had trouble falling pregnant, that was it for you, right? But now we have these treatments, and it's really wonderful when you see people falling pregnant when they've tried for so hard and achieving a wonderful child. And actually, for me, this is not just abstract, it has a personal touch to it. In July this year, my wife gave birth to my wonderful son, Taylor. And if you're thinking he doesn't look very much like me, I've just done a little bit to help you out there. So you're probably thinking, we're talking about IVF, Adrian. Taylor was conceived like this. That is not true. He was conceived like this. That was a dangerous slide, wasn't it? So if any of you have tried to get pregnant recently, you might recognize this. This is an ovulation app. It tracks a woman's menstrual cycle, or a person's menstrual cycle, and it helps you know when they're ovulating and most receptive to conception. And these things are really good, right? They're great if you're trying to fall pregnant, but I learned they're also really terrible. And they're terrible because, conception, right? The process of conception should be fun, until you're getting notifications at 10 p.m. like, if you're not at second base, buddy, you're losing your streak tonight. Now, IVF, right, people who undergo fertility treatments, they try for a really long time. They do a lot of this often, and it's really emotionally and physically exhausting. I've heard of people who have streaks that look more like this.
Whoa!
Right, yeah, and they still can't fall pregnant naturally. Right, in Australia, if you want to undergo these treatments and you want government Medicare support, you have to be declared medically infertile. That can take 12 months of trying those methods. For some perspective, in a quarter of the time, Australia had 3 prime ministers. Not only that, the treatments are expensive. They cost $5,000 to $10,000 per treatment. And physically really difficult, right? I said you get a shit ton of hormones. It can take up to a month. And at the end, you get the pleasure of a needle in your ovaries. Now, to me, that sounds about as pleasant as putting your hand into a wasp nest. when all the wasps have chainsaw hands. But what most people may not realise is that there's more to these treatments, and that is that there is some thought that they may cause cancer. Right, which is quite shocking. I mean, if you're about to undertake this treatment, this is something you would really want to know, right? In fact, I would say you have a right to know. You have a right to know the medical procedures and the risks you undertake. This is the research that I work on. And I'm hoping to enlighten you a little bit about it today. So you might be thinking, okay, really though, Adrian, like fertility treatment's cancer, how common is this really? Is this really that important? Well, let's think fertility, right? Fertility affects everyone. I mean, I assume you were conceived. Yeah. But also, when it comes to the treatments, you have probably know someone who's had a treatment. You might have had a treatment yourself. In fact, I would wager quite a lot you know someone who's had a treatment and you don't know they've had a treatment. 3 million IVF cycles are delivered each year worldwide. 3 million. I've changed nearly that many nappies over the past 11 weeks. So I think I've got that number down. In Australia, 1 in 18 children are now conceived via IVF. And we really need these children, right? Like, Australia's birth rate is dropping faster than Australia dropped prime ministers in 2013. It's Abbott, isn't it? Yeah.
Never gets old.
On a personal level, though, you know, I want these kids. I want potential friends for my son. I want potential students at my university. I want potential victims at Fortnite. I'm over 30 now, man. I can't beat anyone over 10. Yeah. I'm about to disappoint you, though, because I'm about to say we're just at the start of this research, which means I don't have an answer for you yet. Which I know is about as satisfying to hear as the ending of Game of Thrones. But I will give you the information we're using that you can take home with you that's going to guide our research. For the people who undertake these treatments, the cancers that may be implicated later are what we call hormonal sensitive cancers, particularly ovarian cancer and endometrial cancer. That's the lining of the uterus. Not only that, children who are born to these treatments, they might also be at risk of cancer, particularly blood cancers. All right. Now, the silver lining of this, if there is one, is that the real increase in risk, per 100,000 people is actually really small, like my chance of getting more than 4 hours of sleep tonight. But also, it's not a given thing, right? We've spent a lot of time and money on trying to work this out. In fact, we have spent 40 years and tens of millions of dollars of research funding, and we say now, I don't know, man, maybe these things cause cancer. So how am I going to do this? I work with big health data. This is my technical expertise. And normally I tell people I work with big data and they say one of three things. They say, that sounds really cool. Or they say, that sounds really boring. Or they say, how do you keep getting into my house, Adrian? I love big data, what can I say? I'll give you an example of what this actually is and how we're going to do it. So imagine me. Right, when I come into contact with services in Australia, I leave some trace of information. That could be who I am, where I live, some health information about me. Sorry. And just to note, these data is secure, right? I don't actually know when I use it who people are, and it's accessed securely. We can also see things like when someone went to hospital, if they had a fertility treatment, if they developed cancer. Now, if this is just one person, that's not very powerful, but if you have a population's worth, say Australia, of anonymised data, you can do a lot with this, right? You can see whether people are getting these fertility treatments and whether they're at an increased risk of cancer compared to the general population. I'm hoping this research will support the myriad of people who undertake these treatments every day. It'll make them feel safe, confident, and secure when they decide to undergo the treatments. And in doing so, I hope we can achieve a few more of these. Thank you very much, everyone. You've been wonderful. I'm Adrian Walker.